Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. Well, as usual, the Middle East has events taking place that are drawing the attention of the whole world, and considerable influence is being exerted. This week, the government of Iran accused the United States of helping Israel develop its nuclear weapons arsenal. The Iranians say they have proof. Saeed Jalili is the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Council. As such, he is Iran's chief nuclear negotiator. On Monday, Jalili said, "We will soon publish documents on how American-enriched nuclear material was provided and transported to the Zionist regime." Jalili said, "The Muslim world has long questioned how the Zionist regime acquired those nuclear weapons." He continued, "The Zionist regime and those who gave these weapons to the regime should answer for this." I think, first of all, that Iran has no such evidence because the U.S. has never knowingly helped anyone get nuclear materials or know-how. However, spies stole American nuclear secrets and provided the Soviet Union and Red China with the basis for their nuclear programs. Some of them were American spies. But from a strategic point of view, if the U.S. were to provide any Middle East power with such materials and technology, it would have been Israel. All it takes is a little logic. Before the onslaught of political correctness and historical revisionism, political decisions were undertaken based on reality. One of those realities was Islam's historical animosity towards Christians and Jews. Indeed, even today, despite the political correctness that blinds even the most politically correct among us, are glad Iran doesn't have the bomb. And many of us stay up nights worrying about the security of Pakistan's nukes. The second of those realities was the historical and religious ties that bind Christians and Jews. There is a reason why the phrase Islamic bomb instills an instant fear, while the phrase Jewish bomb does not. Nobody has a reason to fear the Jews except those who would do them harm. You can't say that about the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran wants nuclear weapons, has risked everything to get them, and has promised to use them against Israel and the West. Israel has probably had nukes for decades, but nobody knows for sure because Israel doesn't threaten to use them. At a conference in Aspen, Colorado last July, the United Arab Emirates ambassador to the U.S., Yusuf al-Otaibi, explained his nation's position. He told the media, "A military attack on Iran by whomever would be a disaster. But Iran with a nuclear weapon would be a bigger disaster." The ambassador acknowledged that an Israeli attack on Iran would spark street protests by Muslims throughout the region. He said, however, that leaders like himself would be willing to deal with that in exchange for eliminating the Iranian threat. So, you see, even Muslims are afraid of the Islamic bomb. In covering the story, Israel Today magazine explained that Iran, which is Persia, has been in conflict with its Arab neighbors for more than 1,000 years. It has never stopped seeking ways to gain dominance over them. What's more, Iran is a predominantly Shiite Muslim nation, while most of the Arab states are Sunni Muslim. Now, that may not mean a lot, but the conflict between these two sects is often bloody. Most observers doubt that Iran would actually fire a nuclear warhead at a fellow Muslim state, but they all believe that by simply possessing such weapons, Tehran would be able to exert enormous pressure and influence over the regional religious, economic, and diplomatic policies. They most certainly could effectively control the Strait of Hormuz and thus control a major portion of the world's oil. Jeffrey Goldberg is a Middle East expert for the Atlantic Monthly. He told the German magazine Der Spiegel that Ambassador Otaiba's views are shared by most Arab leaders. They see an Israeli strike on Iran as a viable option to the nuclear crisis, since it will not result in war between the Jewish states and its Arab neighbors. Now, how do they know that? They obviously don't feel threatened by Israel. A prominent cleric in Saudi Arabia echoed that opinion. He told Der Spiegel, Israel's agenda has its limits. It is mainly concerned with securing its national existence. But Iran's agenda is global. So one of them is a threat even without nuclear weapons, and the other is a friend even with nuclear weapons, presumably. It's not all that complicated a policy decision to understand, and an even easier one to defend. The Tehran Times reported this week that the Russians will reimburse Iran for the advance payments it has made to Moscow for the S-300 missile defense system. Russia abruptly canceled the deal last month, supposedly in keeping with the Security Council's latest round of imposed sanctions. The S-300 air defense system is reputed to be the most advanced system of its kind in the world. It can track and destroy multiple aircraft and missiles at a range of about 100 miles and altitudes of up to 20 miles. It is able to simultaneously track up to 100 targets. The Russians explain that they canceled the sale in part to prevent an Israeli attack. That's very kind of them. The Moscow Times reported if Israel wanted to take out Iranian nuclear facilities, it would have to be done before the S-300s were installed. A sale would have essentially started the countdown to an Israeli attack. The Iranians are furious that the sale was canceled and are threatening to sue. But they shouldn't be so upset. The Israeli airstrikes that they wanted protection against seem less likely now as more reports filter out of Iran about the damage done by the Stuxnet computer worm. Ali Akbar Salahi is head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization. On Sunday, the Los Angeles Times reported that Salahi admitted that Western spies had infiltrated Iran's nuclear program. His statement was the most frank admission by an Iranian that Western clandestine services had been successful in attempts to penetrate the country's nuclear program. And despite Iranian assurances that the worm did no damage, the Bushehr reactor continues to experience one delay after another. Other plants are still operating, but at reduced functionality. According to a report on the Israeli news website, Devkafile, several atomic scientists and technicians have already been executed for helping to plant the Stuxnet worm. Paranoia is running high among the staff, further reducing their effectiveness. Security measures restrict communications between nuclear scientists, technicians, researchers, and engineers, slowing things down even more. Rumors are circulating that some Russian personnel have been arrested and have not been heard of again. Now, we know that in the run-up to Armageddon, Russia will join a confederacy of nations headed by Iran. But the Bible says it will do so reluctantly. Specifically, it says that Russia will be drawn as an animal with hooks in its jaws. It's apparent to me that Russia, which has recently made a point not to bow to international pressure, is not particularly comfortable with the idea of Iran having the Islamic bomb either. Perhaps that's why they canceled the S-300 deal and maybe smuggled a little USB flash drive into Iran with a very destructive cyber worm on it. You know, as I look at these developments from a prophetic point of view, I knew something had to slow Iran down. Iran will indeed lead a Muslim confederacy along with Russia in an all-out assault to destroy Israel, take over the strategic oil reserves, and most importantly, they will want to bring the Mahdi back with a global war. But this will launch the war of Armageddon that will draw all nations into a global holocaust. The time for this to occur has not yet come. The Antichrist has to come first and set up a one-world government that will appear to bring in the era of peace that the world has so fervently sought. But when the Antichrist declares himself to be God in the middle of a 7-year tribulation, Muslims especially are going to react violently. I know the broad outlines of these prophetic events, but now the details seem to be fitting into place also. Wow, isn't Bible prophecy fascinating? It is to me. The Syrians have established a Scud missile base near Damascus. The evidence is incontrovertible, but the intelligence wasn't smuggled out of Syria by spies. The missile base was photographed on March 22nd by, of all sources, Google Earth. The unclassified satellite photos available to anyone using Google Earth showed extensive construction at several military bases throughout Syria. That includes one of the country's 3 largest missile bases, located 18 miles northeast of Damascus near the city of Adra. The base is in a deep valley between 2 mountains where at least 5 30-foot-long missiles are stored. In the satellite photo, 3 are on trucks in a parking lot. 2 others, however, are in a training area where 20 to 25 people can be made out along with about 20 vehicles. One of the 2 missiles appears to be mounted on a mobile launcher. Another is on the ground. In April of this year, the Kuwaiti newspaper Al Rai reported that Syrian President Bashar Assad was arming Hezbollah with Scud missiles. The paper did not specify the type of Scud, but it's believed to be the Scud-C, which has a range of approximately 400 miles. A few weeks later, in May, the Times of London reported that weapons from Adra were being transshipped to Hezbollah. The Times also reported that Iran was shipping weapons and missiles to Adra via nearby Damascus airport. So, just to recap, various news organizations have reported that Iran shipped weapons and missiles to Adra via nearby Damascus. They also reported that Syria is shipping weapons and missiles from Adra to Hezbollah in Lebanon. And now, Google Earth has photographed Scud missiles on a base near Adra. So I think it's safe to assume that Iran is shipping weapons and Scud missiles to its proxy, Hezbollah, in Lebanon, with Syria's cooperation. With that information as a backdrop, it's interesting to note that Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad arrived in Lebanon on Wednesday for a meeting with Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Last week, Ahmadinejad publicly acknowledged that his Lebanon visit was really a visit to Iran's southern border with Israel. That's right, Iran's southern border with Israel. And I can see where he gets it. Hezbollah was founded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It is funded by Iran. It is equipped by Iran, and it is trained by Iran. It receives its orders from Tehran. Hezbollah now holds a plurality of seats in the Lebanese parliament and controls the levers of power throughout Lebanon. So it wasn't just a taunt. It was a statement of fact. Ahmadinejad is scheduled to travel as far south as the Lebanese towns of Bent Yabil and Maroun Aras. At Maroun Aras, Hezbollah has constructed a replica of the Dome of the Rock under an Iranian flag within sight of the Israeli border guards. Once again, from the viewpoint of biblical prophecy, this could be leading to the fulfillment of a very important prophecy with terrible consequences to Syria. Israel's military leaders have warned President Assad that if they allow Hezbollah to take over Lebanon, Israel will bomb Damascus. They have also